This topic is about the various career pathways for engineering and architecture academics. Many times, quite a few of us always think of the academic pathway as only in a single manner, which is the research pathway. But in this talk, I will focus more on the teaching pathway, the academic administrator pathway, the industry linkage pathway, and the nation building pathway for academics. Now, as I have said before, there are, in a sense, these five main aspects or roles in which the academic play, which is as a researcher, as a teacher, as an administrator, as an industry and academia builder, as well as an agent of nation building. Now, most academic who teaches at university do not think about these other four roles, although they understand that they have to fulfill some parts of it, but they do not understand that they can actually be an expert in any one of these and go on to become professors, regardless of whether they are engineers or architects. They can, in a sense, make their career path within these four other aspects rather than just in a single one, which is a researcher. I would also like to say that much of academia, the links between academic and society, as well as industry, is not there because of our lack in focus in these four areas. Even teaching, people teach this subject and that subject, and they never develop it. And this is a problem in Malaysian academia. Now, most commonly, people think that the academic researcher is the most important role for the academic. But academic researcher in a certain area, for instance, in engineering, say structures or some sort of computer, mechatronic, although they expand the boundary of knowledge, this is just only one role in actual fact. We have also the academic nation builder, which crosses boundaries of different fields to design policies for safety for the present and the future. Architect or engineer who do research in certain areas need not necessarily become good nation builders because they cannot combine the various fields, such as the social science or psychology, in order to understand society. Similarly, when we build universities as an organization, the academic administrator becomes bogged down with administration to the point that they never develop aspects of administration that can become much better in relation to the delivery of the curriculum. The academic teacher is the one that is most important because we never develop the teaching of any subjects. For instance, in architecture, we have the teaching of construction or structures or theory of architecture. And in engineering, we have the aspects of mathematics or certain aspects of engineering. But these are never developed. They are not developed very, very well. There are some that has been developed that I've seen books being produced. For instance, in books about drafting, books about calculating some mathematical problems. But further than that, nothing much is being done to become the academic teacher. And finally, we have the academic professional industry, in which the links between industry and academia is still not there in its full form. And this is something that can become a main feature of any career pathway. If you look at the life of Professor Dr. Stephen Hawking, he won the Nobel Prize not just because of his theories or ideas about the universe, But because he was able to communicate his ideas to the larger populace, certainly to the scientific or the committee of the Nobel laureate, he had written books about a brief history of time, or God created the integers and large scale structure of space and time. And this made him not just famous, but why has he done so? Why did he try to communicate to the public? Well, because the public is the one that later on become the policymakers in a democratic country, and policymakers are the ones that will create budgets and opportunities and financing for research, and that is the thing that is hoped by Stephen Hawking. Other than that, we have people talking about the origin of the universe from the religious perspective without understanding certain scientific basis, and they becomes policy makers or opinion makers, and this is something which needs to be corrected. He further wrote several other books uh, with another author, and because of his condition, his medical condition, he had to have someone helping, and he wrote the black holes and baby universe, putting in titles that people can relate to and easy to understand, the universe in a nutshell, or the grand design. And these are aspects of communication which many of our academics in Malaysia are very extremely weak. We have 3,000 professors. I would say 90% of them can't communicate with the public because simply they think that, well, you just communicate with your peers, only communicate at the seminars, and nothing much about the media or in a public forum. So I think this has stunted the growth of the country because professors and those who know do not seem to take the time to communicate to the public. Look at what happened to Sungai Kim Kim issue, the environmental disaster that almost killed 2,000 children. Why? Because scientists or professors in the area of environmental engineering or chemistry did not put up media statements or actually advise the people about the dangers, but they just write papers, publish them, get promoted, get grants, travel the world, and that's all that they think the role of academia is. Now, for this uh, talk, I will be focusing on, first of all, the teaching expertise, how to develop the teaching so that we could impart knowledge in a better manner, how to develop academic management so that our academic management does not become superficial and people are happy doing the work of teaching and research in an environment that is very inspiring and meaningful. Expertise in industry linkages, how the marriage between academia and industry can come about, even having labs or practice labs in the university and having academic research in the firms of architects and engineers. Finally, personality in nation building. Nation building simply means that we need to have engineers and architects who go beyond engineering and architecture by touching on a wide variety of issues. So we may have an engineer talking about cities, talking about society, how society would be reacting with the future technology, a new economy, like we are having the pandemic. How do we go over this as a society? And this requires people to read and understand diverse issues rather than just a single issue in engineering and architecture. Now, some or most academics always give some excuse for not writing. For instance, they don't have a big budget or grant to do research. No research, therefore no writing. This is very strange because they do not understand that you can do some writings without a big research grant, and I will explain later why or how. Some would say there are no postgraduate students to do the writing for them, and again, because these people understand writing as only a journal publication. No equipment as well as no material to experiment with are also part of the excuses. In actual fact, you can actually write even if you don't have the big budget, the equipment, or you don't have the materials nor the postgraduate student. You could philosophize. You could ask questions. What would happen if? What would happen if? And these are the things that you can write about in the media, in a book, in even in your blog. Once you do that, then you will become famous, even celebrated, and without any research grant. This is what I found out when I began writing in the media. And my name being mentioned in many situations, although I do not have any research grant. Now, big people with important posts like ministers and general managers are those who love to talk about ideas, who love to talk about issues. And this is where uh, the academic can also be part of. They don't talk about how to do experiments and what results that you get. They would like to talk to people who have big ideas, not people who just talk about laboratory issues. And experiments are important, but then ideas are more important than experiments because first come the ideas, then the experiments. Um, as I said many times, ideas are independent of funding. You don't need 200,000 ringgit to have ideas. You just need a sense of responsibility and excitement and enthusiasm to do something, and then you can wonder and dream and have ideas as much as you can. First of all, let's talk about teaching, how to develop teaching or how teaching can become one of the career pathways for an academic to the point that they become the professor of architecture or a professor of engineering. Now, many people find that very, very strange because they never thought about it. All they were doing is teaching architecture theory, all they were doing is teaching mathematics and engineering, and they didn't know that they can become professors in these particular subjects. Now, in America, there are professors in architecture, history, and theory, which is what I am at the moment. I am the referred person in this area. And so I have written books, given talks, and even developed methods of teaching and written things or books equivalent to a kind of a textbook, encyclopedias. All of this I have done. And so you can write conference papers about your subject. If you're teaching, say, introduction to engineering now, how do you know that is the best way to teach that subject? Unless you do some research and compare with others, and then how do you know it's good? You need to do some evaluation. So you can devise ways to evaluate and write it for papers in education rather than papers in engineering journals or papers in architecture journal, but in education journal. Who's going to do that? Who is going to write about which way is better to teach architecture theory, for instance? Only those who are teaching that can answer that question. Then you can have course books. And in a promotion exercise, I would always like, you've been teaching 10 years. Where is your course book? If you don't have course books after teaching for 10 years, something is definitely wrong with you. Where are your textbooks? And after writing the course books, you could actually publish it as a textbook. Of course, many people look down on children books on engineering, but I will show at the end or during this talk great engineering professors writing books for children. Now, some of you may be asking, well, what kind of paper should I write for education? Well, very simple. It could be your experiment with the methods of education. For instance, the teaching of structures. What is the best way to teach structures to architects? How? What is the best way to teach certain engineering subject? How do you know this is the best way? Just because your students score A doesn't mean anything. And what are the criteria for that? And so you could devise experiments with that and report it in the paper. If you cannot understand how to do the research, you could combine with someone in the education department and have a co-paper, but doing experiments with your or testing with your subject. You could also write about the curriculum or new curriculum ideas about engineering practice. This is not in one sense research, but these are ideas papers, what we call position papers. Position papers are also important. Not many academics write position papers because they are so-called not trained. When they do PhD, they just what I call fill in the gap, and they never philosophize about things. In order to write this kind of paper, you need to philosophize. You need to have an attitude about society, about the environment, about relationship with the world. You could also look at the syllabus and compare with overseas syllabus of a subject matter, and then write something about it, make comments, make criticism, compare. And this can also be papers for education and for other things also. As I said, you can do course books where all these assignments that you have given can be compiled carefully, and the exercise going on having this bank of questions. Now, when I taught structures, I began to have these kinds of compilation, and it is very helpful to the student. They buy the course books, which I publish myself, and the students practice with it, and then they can score better grades. But many lecturers do not have course books. They just teach this subject in and out for 10 years without any course book. I find that it is good to have something like what we studied with in the MCE or SPM, where you could try yourself, then look up the answer in the back, and then rework it backwards. And that's why the course book is very important. In a promotion exercise, I will ask for that. Once you have the course books, the next step is to convert it into a textbook. Now, to make it easier and to have a wider market, you can combine with several other authors, and you can get someone to do some graphic work for you. But now with the computers, it's relatively easy to do these things. You could then take the concepts that you have learned and put in the real Malaysian case studies, maybe from your students' work, but edited for you, and also feature real industry players in Malaysia. It'll be very exciting. After that, you can convert this into a YouTube video and claim for further promotion, in which you will say that you have a different way of teaching. So many people do online teaching, but they never create a textbook in the first place, and that is where a lot of online teaching becomes not so good, because it has not gone through a textbook stage where there is some editing and some comment and criticism of it. Then we have children books. In developed countries, um, some professors would write the children book, or book companies would hire professors as a consultant, say to explain about the atom, to explain about the universe, and they would then produce books and get other writers to actually rephrase these things. And these are very important to inspire the new students because of the children. In Malaysia, we have thousands of academics, but we don't have people who has good explanation. I will show you the great professors who write books for the adult, for them to understand, and also for children, for them to be inspired. And this is how we develop as a first world nation. In this country, in this Malaysia, we are not going to be the first world nation because we keep knowledge to ourselves, keep writing those journal papers until we die. And then what becomes of that knowledge in the brains and in the minds of these people? It is wasteful, and then you have to start all over again. So they did not leave a legacy or a heritage for the young scholars. So the mark of a real scholar is how to dumb down the complex knowledge and information into inspiring facts and pictures. Some professors think this is far beneath them, meaning something that is not important to do. I disagree with these people. If you do not leave a heritage of knowledge that is understood by the young, then you are not, to me, a professor, because you profess only to your own self and to a few people. You do not profess to the world, to the larger context of the audience. Just to recap, some of the areas of research that can be developed in teaching is something to do with documentation of syllabus and the method of teaching that has been around for many. If we were to ask, where is this documentation, say, of teaching of mathematics to engineers, for instance? There is none. Where is this teaching of, say, architectural history and theory? How does someone, say, Associate Professor A, who's been teaching architecture theory and history for 15 years, what does he do? How does he do it? Do we have a documentation of that? If that professor does not document, then someone need to document that. If not, the new people to teach the subject will just go on and on, what we call reinventing the wheel. Evaluating accepted teaching methods, meaning that you compare and also evaluate using certain tools, which is the best way to teach something. And this is how we develop the teaching. Experimenting with different teaching tools and aids, we need to document. Someone teaching fundamentals of design, do it this way. Someone doing the same subject, but they do it in another way. What is the result of that? How does the student react to that? Is this a good teaching method that you can actually adapt for your own and for the posterity, meaning for people into the future? Relationship between professional practice and the subject syllabus. How relevant is the subject to the so-called real world? Is it relevant, or is the real world, in a sense, doing something which is not correct? If we don't say something, then the real world will keep on repeating that method until the day that they decide, oh, it is wrong, when in fact we could have already identified it in the early stage. Philosophical issues outside of the profession and the subject is also, again, another aspect of position writing. You could actually do research in what veteran academics think about, say, engineering education of certain subject or architecture education of a certain subject. This is the weakness in our country. We do not document it. We do not document the experience of those who have gone through this. Therefore, we keep on and on reinventing the wheel, when in fact, worse, we don't even know what the wheel looks like. So this is the tragedy of academia in Malaysia, from my perspective. First, we can see from this weightage of someone who's going into the teaching line, we would give a higher weightage for the teaching, because all of this work needs to be done by every academic. So book publication, teaching, that would be more emphasized. 60% would be for that, while the others are something that they can just contribute to. Now, being an academic administrator is also one part of the development of an academic. In public university, there are these roles that each academic needs to play, and to me, I have never liked this role because I like the other roles better. But whether I like it or not, I needed to do it, and I was appointed the director of a research center, and that was my administration. It wasn't that difficult, and because there's not that many people to administer, so I have escaped being a head of department or dean. I could have been the dean, but then after my controversial writings, nobody wanted to appoint me as a dean, which is fine with me. But for other people, you may be appointed as a head of department, appointed as a dean, but then don't forget, if you don't do some things there, then you will just be doing this, and when you go for your promotion exercise, people will be asking you about research. So if you want to decide to go into the administration line of the university, maybe whether you are engineering or architect, doesn't matter. If you're targeting yourself to be the vice chancellor or the deputy vice chancellor, then go ahead, read up on administrators, um, the administration of universities. I think the books published by Dr. Zaini Ujang, former vice chancellor of UTM, has a lot to say about the role of universities and how management of academia can be done in one sense. And so you can publish conference papers and journals in management rather than in your field of engineering or architecture, or even if they allow you to publish something in engineering and architecture, then that can be also uh, have a publication there. You could develop SOP, standard operating procedure, document it, document the past, document the present, and do an analysis of it, and produce a document for the future. This is also something that can be done. And even if it is not published, it is can be put together in a kind of a booklet that can be used by future lecturers for them to refer to. You could also have writings on book chapters. Book chapters do not necessarily have a lot of research element, but it can contain experiential element. So this can be done by you also as an academic administrator. Now, if you're wondering what kind of research material for an academic that is going to angle or focus on management and then administration, well, you can write about how to inspire academic staff. How effective was that? Um, how to build the best faculty in terms of organization. You need to compare with this faculty or that faculty. And so those are materials that is researchable. Um, Look at how research centers are set up, how they are set up, how they've grown, a study of several research centers that are successful, a study of research centers that was a failure. If I were to ask the question, what makes a research center successful? Who can answer? No one can answer because no one has done any research on that subject. Write about managing weak students. How do you manage students who are weak in this way or in that way? Has anybody asked that question? Well, yes, they have asked. But has anybody documented what has been done? Maybe there is some. But has anybody compared to what others have done? Now, this is something that can be done. There was a candidate that went through a professorship exercise, and she was an engineering lecturer, but her expertise was how to teach engineering to Malay students, and she was appointed professor because of her work in successfully, in one sense, teaching Malay students the subject of engineering. So you can have develop SOP documentation again on registration system, choices of subjects, laboratory management, or promotion. What is the philosophy of promotion? What is the um, expected staff with assistant professorship or associate professorship or even a professorship? Even across different universities, there are different. We don't even have a research on, let's say, what does UKM think about a professor, and UTM, UKM, and UPM may have some similarities, but they also have their differences, and we need to identify them and share it with those who are going to become professors, so that they can angle it and develop certain ways to fulfill those criteria. In a book chapter, as I said, a book chapter does not necessarily have to have a research element, but it should be written in a manner that lay people can understand. And so you can put a book together as an editor, say to find 10 person to write a chapter into the book, and then you can edit it. And you could also have experiences and reflection that can become the base for the writings. And you could even have comparison between these experiences. For instance, if you were to write a book about, say, what does 10 great veteran engineering professors in Malaysia think about engineering education? So aside from interviewing each one of them and writing what they say, you could write papers comparing them and then coming with some sort of resolution or conclusion of your own. You could also do research on the efficiency of certain procedures, efficiency of certain organizational constructs, evaluation processes, and methods of promotion assessment, as well as marketing. Who wants to become engineers? How many students want to become this kind of engineer or that kind of architect? These are research that can be done towards marketing as well as development of curriculum, and that can become papers in itself, and later on become some sort of a position understanding to actually make the entity of the university to be much better than it was. So there are a lot of research opportunities there. As an administrator, many academics simply treat administration as something I have to do at the end of the day, clock in, clock out. Then at the end of your term, after 2 years, you have nothing to show for it. I mean, if you were there or you were not there, it's the same. So what did you have to show? What SOP have you developed? What kind of publication booklet have you produced? Have you done any of this? Now, maybe you say you don't have time, but you could actually instruct someone, pay an assistant to actually document some of the papers that you had written when you were a head of department, in order to resolve certain issues, and that can become basis for papers, book chapters, and even booklets. So suggested promotion criteria, again, administration, the kinds, not the amount of administration that you do, but the development, the new ideas, the new methods of administrating or of administration that you have done. This is the one that will count on the promotion, not just numbers and numbers and numbers and numbers and roles of what you are being or having done. I think we don't really care about that. What we care is, so what is the new thing that you have developed? So what is the experience that you have gained? How can that move the university forward? How can that move the faculty forward? This is the key question that must be answered by academic who choose administration. And then the product will definitely be books, chapters, and maybe talks, other writings, SOPs, um, booklets of instructions, and so forth. So that would be the main evaluating criteria. Now, in engineering and architecture, we belong to an industry. Unlike the social science, we are having this thing called the profession and industry. Now, the industry always like to think that they are the one in charge. They set the tone and then the university has to follow. Well, that may be so, but it can also be the other way around, um, how the academic can actually control the industry. But that is usually when someone understands in depth what the industry is doing. And so the relationship between academia and industry is always said to be important, but I do not see that it being done effectively. What is this relationship? What does industry need? Now, many firms in Malaysia, they just do work, as I said, clock in and clock out. At the end of the day, they get money, they get project, or they get bankrupt, whatever. What's what's the thing that they learn? How do they move forward? How does the country move forward? Nobody cares. Okay, so that is not the right way. We need to have academic and industry linkage so that we can understand certain aspect of industry can be moved this way or can move this way or that way. That will be the conclusion, not just to have the relationship, not just to have the activities, not just to actually help each other to get projects. No, that's not the purpose. The purpose is to move industry, shape it. How does it shape into the future? So we need an academic to actually understand that. If you leave it up to the industry, they will just always be reactive, but they cannot preempt, they cannot philosophize with other industries, with other issues of society. They cannot do that. But the academic can actually do that. And this is why it is important to have this as a career. Now, as an academic, there are academics who are architects who do projects, and certainly documenting the projects industry experience is basic. Many people who go through or academic who goes through promotion exercise, they don't have anything to show. You've done the project again, clock in, clock out. Where what is it that you learn about the project? What is it about the project that can be shared with others? If you do not have this basic documentation, then you are just doing work. You are not being an academic. You're just being like the practitioner outside. There's no difference between you as an academic and the practitioner because you're just doing work, as I said, clock in, clock out. You need to present and say, look, after this experience, this is what was done, and this is what I have learned, and this is how I think in the future we should proceed. This is the fundamental aspect in which an academic would approach any industry project. So recording all engagement and learning and taking it from there, how do you learn, and then comparing it with others. This is the basis of the research. What happens in memorandum of agreement, contracts, relation, um, ultimately to produce a laboratory of practice in the architecture profession in the faculty, that you could have studios with industry players, and you could also have consultancy offices in the faculty in order to bring the industry into the faculty, and you could then export the faculty into the industry by having small research stations in big firms like the Hijaz Kasturi, and you have one corner in which this person documenting Hijaz's work, going to the office and actually documenting. So they become the archive with all the hundreds of projects that he has done, and they would archive it in this way and that way. In that manner, we establish a very strong role in industry. So, aside from those documenting the experience, internship, best practices of project, what happens to bylaws, how it came about, what were the problem with these bylaws, how were they updated, what was the process. These are all industry related, and we need to have someone following the stories behind the evolution development of regulations, bylaws, and SOP or standard procedures. These are the aspects which are important. We also have a subject called professional practice. Now, ask yourself the question, how do we know this is the best way to teach professional practice? Where is the textbook on professional practice? Is it there? Is it being written? If it is not, then somebody needs to write that. So this is part of the research activity that. And so again, the element of consultancy becomes bigger, but this consultancy must come with documentation and papers learning from all this work. And that is also the other 30% and 60% being given to these two aspects: publication of books, chapters, and the consultancy. Doesn't have to be research, but it can also be research if it is transferred to the research in the manner in which I have mentioned. Now, the fourth pathway or career pathway is something which not many people are thinking about actually, but it also happened to be my area of expertise, nation builder. Now, being a nation builder is simply to bridge the gap between the field of the field that we are in, whether engineering or architecture, and society. What happens to society in relation to, say, should we be building mosques in this manner with many minarets, expensive domes? And so, how do you impact by having engagement with, say, the Department of Religious Affairs, with the NGOs of Islam, in order to explain that we don't have to build mosques this way? And so you could write books, media articles, conferences, and journals that accept position papers, and also book chapters. So, being a nation builder, perceptions of, say, non-Muslims on mosques, are they frightened? Are they thinking that it is wasteful, or what are they thinking about? How do we bridge the gap so that they will become a bit friendlier? And what does the Muslim think about the non-Muslim in relation to the mosque? Do they think that the non-Muslim are dirty people, so they won't allow them in the mosque? And so forever we will be having this racial as well as religious tension between us. So the academic who's read a lot can actually be the bridge between the society. We can be like Michio Kaku or Carl Sagan and Stephen Hawking with their popular books, how they popularize science, how they explain and communicate science to the people. And you don't have to be accurate or based on some research, but it is part of philosophy. Some say romanticizing, but actually romanticizing is a higher form of thinking because it attempts to predict the future by also looking at the multi layered aspects of an issue as well as the multifaceted or multi views that a certain issue has. Alvin Toffler, Future Shock. I read the book 30 years ago, and a lot of things that he had said had already come about. And this is how a person like Alvin Toffler, who's a journalist, not a scientist or a technologist, but one who understands those things and then put it together into something called future studies. So in media articles, you are trying to explain or convince people, say, about sustainability. We talk about sustainability, the SDGs, but how many people out there understand its importance? If we look at in our country, racism, it can go very fast in terms of news, whether it is fake or not, nobody cares. But it can jeopardize the whole country, form very strong opinions. But why can't it be the same with SDG? We cannot say that the community or people are stupid. all we can say is that the professor writing is not effective. They don't write enough, they don't talk about it enough, they don't actually engage with the relevant people enough. And the relevant people have nothing to do with that particular science or engineering or architecture, but they are just ordinary policymakers, politicians, civil servants. But they need to be engaged, and we need to promote ideas, good practices, as well as uh, good attitudes towards certain things. That is what conferences accept certain position papers in nation building. Um, but there are also journals who give some space for ideas. I do not look upon people writing scopus journals, meaning that it is research and things like that. Research is one thing. You identify some sort of a gap and then you fill that gap, and that's fine. But philosophizing and giving an opinion is equally, or if not more important, although many disagree with that because they say, how can you give an opinion when you don't have the research? Well, what about you? You have the research, but you don't have any opinion. And whatever opinion you have is only skewed towards one area of research. And you don't know the politics of it, you don't know the history of it, you don't know the society impact upon it. All you know is your little hole in the wall. Now, people with position papers and philosophy is looking at the wall. What is the wall? What's the function of the wall? What's the house that the wall is in? Is it a house? Is it an office? What is it? And so many researchers who are professors professing that they are writing scopus paper actually don't know what the wall is. And it is also something that can be done with book chapters, uh, because it is about communicating to people who have not studied the science or the engineering or the art of a certain object. So the challenge there is to be the great community. And so for nation building, it falls under community contribution. That would be bigger. So the 60% goes to books and other publication, community contribution. It can also go with research, because it can be refocused towards that. But more importantly, it is for communication, and books and media, articles, encyclopedias, different kinds of books are the key to forming opinions in society. And thus, we come to the last few slides. One of the things that I always try to remind engineers and architects is to cross your field to social science, to art, to communication. If you keep within your own area, you will not be a philosopher. Now some say that's fine. I don't like to be a philosopher because I'm a researcher. Yes, you're just filling in gaps in walls or holes in wall without understanding what the wall could be or is or was or can actually become. And so you need to cross. If you are going towards associate professor as well as professor, you need to actually have another area. For instance, if you are in communication, then you can look at the arts. What form of art that needs the technology, or if the technology itself can become an art form. Uh, One of the mathematics professor that I once knew in UKM was actually an expert in determining the age of ships that have been sunk in the ocean for hundreds of years, because he specializes in wood that has been soaked in seawater, and he can tell um, how old this wood are. And that is his expertise because he crossed into the archaeology, or the art of um, ship or ships that have sunk for many hundreds of years. and that is so part of history. And so going into history, so you need to actually get out of your comfort zone of your own engineering, mechatronic, or civil engineering, and get into some other field. Then only you will be able to find a greater meaning. So this is an example of Professor Dr. Mario Sabadori, who became an engineer, then later on an academic and a professor. He is famous because, to me, because he wrote books about how to teach structures to, first to lay people, but then to architects. And then he went on to try to explain certain aspects of engineering to children. You can see books on math games for middle school, and also to the lay people, art of construction, how do you construct things. And he also teaches the advanced engineering of structures, as well as an understanding of structures with books like Why Buildings Stand Up. I have read this book, and it is marvelous. We see Michio Kaku, one of my favorite scientists, who not only contributes to theory of how the universe is made up, but he also communicate that to people to understand. And looking at the title of the book, Physics of the Impossible, scientific exploration of the world of phases, force field, teleportation, and time travel, which is about movies in Star Trek, and explaining the fundamental foundation of this, and can we actually do all those things. How science will revolutionize the world. How does engineering revolutionize the world? How does architecture revolutionize Malaysia? Do we have thoughts on that? Do we have thoughts and ideas about what is our future city going to look like? What is our lifestyle going to look like? If we do not philosophize, then our little hole in the wall becomes so little that it becomes insignificant. You need to widen it. Beyond Einstein, the cosmic quest for theory of the universe, how science will shape human destiny in our daily lives. By the way, Michio Kaku also has his own television series, and that is not about him trying to be popular, but he is popularizing science to the people and to the children. We have a report that less and less students are choosing science. Why? Because it's boring. Professors are not explaining science in a very exciting manner. Professors are explaining science to professors, and they are keeping it within themselves. And that doesn't do anything to. So more of his book about, say, nuclear power. Now he's touching on politics. So who's going to advise our politician? Look at what's happening in Malaysia. The politician change camps just because of their own selfish interests. There is no higher agenda, bigger agenda. You can change camps. That's not a problem. Perhaps you disagree in Mahathir's vision of creating the third car, but you believe in a different economic structure for Malaysia, and you can change camps because of that. But not because one camp want to give you ministership or the LC position. That one is not really very good for you to be changing. But then the question that we have to ask: who teaches this politician? What are we doing as an academic? How do we advise so that Sungai Kim Kim incident does not occur? The civil servant ignore it, the politician ignore it, even the academics ignore it. Then who is supposed to save the children next time when the poisonous fume comes into the schoolyard? So can you actually think about such things and make academia more meaningful? Choose your career pathways within the construct of this meaningful. So in comparison, we could see the academic researcher, the academic teacher, academic professional industry, the administrator, the nation builder. I've talked about this, the four: teacher, professional, industry, and administrator and nation builder. I did not talk about researcher because that is something which is prevalent at the moment. So we could see that these are the different pathways with different people can actually go into, and that will then create a more meaningful faculty rather than just everyone doing research in one particular specific area in engineering, specific area in architecture. Finally, you have to build your own future. No one can build it for you. You have to build it, develop it, sell yourself that you are the most important person, and how does that contribute to the wider philosophic construct of things. But if you never philosophize, then the whole becomes very small, and there are 200 people trying to fit into that hole, then you have a problem. You need to widen the hole by having this philosophy and fit yourself into another hole which other people are not there yet, so that you are the one pioneering. So, what are you interested in? What do you care about most? These are the two fundamental questions that you must ask yourself. And what would you like to be remembered? And what kind of lifestyle do you want for you and your loved one in the future? If you ask all these relevant questions, then you would find a more meaningful area that you could focus in, and life becomes very exciting, very meaningful, and very contributive, both financially, socially, spiritually, even for you to actually become an important person in a wider construct of community rather than just one small department or faculty. So you decide now and then go get it lah. That is your, I mean, the ball is in your court, and you are the one to determine it. I've always said that being an academic is the most uh, interesting thing and wonderful thing, because you decide what the problem is. You then tell other people that the problem is important. After that, you find some kind of solutions to it. Then you spend your life explaining the solutions to a lot of people, and you get promoted, and you get recognized, and you get financial rewards for this. You create the problem. In other fields, problem comes to you. Only in the academic profession, you create the problem. Okay, you are the one who build up the problem, and then you decide the solution, and of course talk about it, and people will reward you for it. So good luck in your chosen career pathways in engineering and architecture. Thank you.